Detroit Pistons select Luke Kennard from Duke University.
Bang! Samaje Christian, 3.
Welcome, everybody. Triple Double Podcast back on the air. My name is Corey Albertson of Triple Double Prospects. Jason Morrow of 270 Hoops is here as always as our producer, and we've got a great guest for you today. Today's guest is Coach Mark Mitchell, a 20-year veteran in Cincinnati high school coaching and the newly announced head coach at Cincinnati West High. Coach Mitchell was the head coach at Cincinnati Taft High School from 2003 to 2013, winning the Senators to an Ohio State title in 2011, as well as many other accolades. Since then, Coach Mitchell has been on the Ohio State women's team staff, where he coached some great players, including his daughter, Kelsey, 3-time Big Ten Player of the Year and the number 2 pick in the 2018 WNBA draft. Big Mitch, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
No problem, man. We're just trying to get, some of the high school coaches in the area throughout Ohio on here, just hear different vantage points about different topics. And, one thing with you when you left, Cincinnati to pursue the college thing 4 years ago, everyone knew you wanted to coach your daughters. It was a blow to the Cincinnati scene, particularly the inner city basketball scene, and we're extremely excited to have you back. So real quick, anyone who's not familiar with you, just kind of run us through your career from Wynn Woods, even before that, all the way through now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. It's good to be back. And it's funny that you say that, I guess I was missed greatly, and I really appreciate that. I've received some of the warmest welcomes that I've ever received in my life about being back. So, I guess the man upstairs, he got a funny way of kind of putting you back in a spot, I guess, where you're probably the most needed for his work. But the interesting thing, how I got into basketball was funny. And my best friend, Harlan Barnett, who, we both went to Princeton and we played on the 83 state championship team. He probably knows me and my wife. They know me the best and know that when I got done playing college football, and I had a couple brief stints in, playing some of the pro stuff, but it wasn't anything significant. So, a lot of people thought that I was going to kind of migrate into the high school football, into college football and beyond. But when I got cut, and I was telling my players this over at West High, couple days last week, and I told them, I said, you got to be careful of how disgruntled you got. That's actually how I got into basketball, coaching basketball, because I was so mad at the game of football because I felt, once again, I didn't accomplish all that I wanted to accomplish. And, I felt that I should have been there. But, it kind of led me to the direction I ended up taking. And when I tell people all the time, I've done everything in basketball, I've done everything. Because, at the 7th grade level, when I first started, you got to sweep the gym floor. You got to clean the bleachers. You got to move this. You pretty much everything all at one time. And that was the interesting thing. And that group right there kind of was the starting block for me, because that group was really, really, they kind of left me in a bad situation because they took all the good players and put them on one team and kind of left me, all the players who were kind of in between. So we had to find a way. So defensively, that's where it all started. And I was probably as hard on that particular group of kids as I've ever been. But we went all the way through the season. I think we were 0-12 through the regular season. And we ended up winning 3 games in the GMC tournament and lost at the buzzer in the GMC tournament. And, then from there, we just kind of worked it from there. And I knew at that point in time I wanted to coach basketball. And, Eric Thomas down at Taft, because I was down at Taft the first time with Lamarcus Ward and Harold Howard and a really good group of kids, Bucky Coates. I was down there with those guys. And Roberto Allen, matter of fact, Roberto over at Gamble, he was on that team. So, and that was that was really good because they were talented, they were tough, they were hard-nosed, and that kind of fit my personality. So right there, I knew at some point I wanted to come, back to the inner city to coach. And it's funny because I got home from maybe a week or two after I left Ohio State, and I got home. My mom pulls out this interview I did, man, back when I was in college, and it's funny and I had to share it. I had to post it on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. It's a quote in there on the interview. It says, "I would love to coach in the inner city and help kids, reach their dreams." And and here it is again. I fall back into this realm to be able to coach. So I coached with Eric Thomas. He left and then went to Aiken. My wife was on our second set of twins, and she was on bed rest. So I had to make a decision, either keep coaching or go into officiate and stay close to the game. But she made that decision, so I ended up going to officiate. So a lot of people figure out, once I tell people I was a high school official, people go, wow. So, that's a lot of times, a lot of people get texts and all that. A lot of times I didn't get texts because primarily I knew how to talk to officials. But went over to Aiken with Eric for maybe a month, had to resign because my wife ended up at West High with Timmons in 97, 98, and ended up there with him. Coached there 1 year, and the next following year, I spent 5 years after that at Winton Woods with Dave Lumpkin. And Dave Lumpkin was probably, at that point in time, he was probably the most influential over my career because, I knew what to do. I knew how to plan. But I had no idea how to implement offense at what rate and, all of that stuff. I had no idea. And I learned a lot from Lump. I credit Lump with a lot of influence upon my career as a coach. And then after I left Lump in 2003, I ended up at Taft. Now, the funny thing at Taft, and this is what I tell a lot of young coaches, you got to learn to be patient because every door that opens, you're not supposed to go through that door because up to that point, I went on 19 interviews. I was literally the runner-up 19 times. Prior to me getting it at Taft, I had just came down between me and the guy that was at Middletown. I forget his name before. Oh, my goodness. His son, I think, Ronay. Coach Ronay. And it came down between me and him, and he got the Middletown job. And, man, I was crushed. And it wasn't about a week later, the Taft job came open. And Eric Thomas and Anthony Smith hired me down at Taft. And from there, we went on a heck of a run.
Well, I want to stop you there for a minute. So I was doing some research preparing for this, and as this is something I didn't know. I looked at an article, I think it was an Ohio State article, and talked about you, and it said when you took over Taft in 2003, they had just finished 10 straight losing seasons. And I never knew that there was a time when Taft basketball wasn't an elite program.
Yeah, it went, and I'm going to tell you how all that went. 81, 82, 83, that was Kennard Johnson, that group. And then like Eric Martin came in and Alan Dunn was in that group. And then when Eric Thomas came back, that was the group. He finally got that group together. After he left, they went on it was a terrible, terrible loser streak. Because, a lot of people don't realize Taft has a lot of history in terms of basketball and athletics, from the Jimmy Wins and all that crew down there, the Neil Craigs. And, they got Taft has such a unique history that I think sometimes a lot of that had gotten lost in what it was. And I had to actually tell a lot of my kids, because I think I had a couple kids that were part of the Kennard Johnson family. So they kind of knew. But other than that, not a lot of people knew what was going on. But, yeah, Taft had went in a deep hole. And now I tell you what else killed me. When Cincinnati Public came out with that, it was a 2.0 pass affair. It was something, and that hurt a lot of kids. it hurt a lot of kids because you didn't have a lot of things in place that you have in place now that are really, really helping kids along and helping kids and stuff like that. But knowing that, when you look at it, Taft, they struggled. They struggled. So I never forget when I got the day after I got the Taft job, it was about, and this is pre-Twitter and Facebook and everything, but word still traveled fast. And you know what everybody said? Man, that's the worst job you could ever take. They'll never win at Taft. And I'll never forget. I tell people the exact day and time. July the 17th, 2003, I walked in the gym. I had made one phone call to DeAndre Bird. Eric Martin gave me his number. I made one phone call, and in 15 minutes, DeAndre had 8 guys in there. And Bobby Jones, me and him knew each other from Wynn Woods. I said, all right, I know I can bring Bobby in. And I had no idea I was going to bring Marco in or B.T. Sherman. I had no idea I was going to bring them in because, Marco at that time, he was a huge. So I said, well, me and Bobby said, this is what it's going to be. And I never forget, we were doing the 2-and-around drill. And them guys shot that basketball. And Bobby looked at me, and I looked at him. And I said, Bobby, we're going to be pretty good, man. And, and everybody kept talking about how they going to be losers. They going to be this. They going to be that. And I said, no, man, we're going to be pretty good. And then I really got lucky. And I ain't going to lucky, fortunate, whatever you want to call it. DeAndre Bird, Eddie Gray, Travis Donald, Vontae, Patrick Blanchard, and countless others. Man, they were such good kids. I mean, they were really, really good kids. So that was easy. I didn't have to fight for the locker room. Now, I always tell coaches this story. And the kid was a good kid. And I won't name their names, but a lot of people say, man, what was the first thing you did? I actually got rid of the best player on that team. He was the best player on that team, easily, hands down. But I knew I would have to, with him on the team, I knew I would have to fight for the locker room. And I couldn't fight for the locker room. I had to have the locker room so that those kids could have my undivided attention and that they could figure out what I needed them to do. And this is the one thing I tell people about that Taft experience. It could have been the same way, but all those kids, Eddie, DeAndre, Travis, John Stone, they wanted change. And I just happened to be the person that came along with the idea of talking about change.
Well, let's look at it like this, Mitch. We got people from different walks of life, listening to this podcast. And, like I told you before we started, we wanted to talk about, we had a podcast with Carl Kramer. We've had Ricardo Hill on here. We've had some other guys. We've talked a lot about how they build a culture of winning at their program, how they build a culture of buying into the stuff you want them to be about. And, Moeller and Walnut Hills have one type of demographic when you look at a socioeconomic and everything. And for people who don't know, when you deal with the Cincinnati Taft, it's getting a little bit better down there, but especially 2003, you're dealing with the poorest of the poor, one of the highest crime rates in the country. And that all factored into you building the program. And you really very publicly took a stance of our kids come from nothing and it's us against the world mentality. So how did you, especially in the early days, kind of build that culture up?
Well, I tell you what, I was the last peg in that model, in building that, model. Anthony Smith and Eric Martin did a great job, and they came up with this idea. And it was funny how the stars aligned because I felt the same way about education. And they felt about co-curriculars. And what we needed to do was find a common theme amongst kids. Now, here's the interesting thing. Like I tell people, you could say you may not have $2 to rub, 2 nickels to rub together. You may have a table full of food, but at the end of the day, there's a common theme amongst all kids. All kids want the opportunity to do something special with their life. And it's unequivocally up to us as adults to give them that platform. and Mr. Smith and Eric Martin, along with Mike Martin, I was the last peg in that. And we all fell in line with one another with the idea, man, we got to do whatever needs to be done to give these kids a platform for them to be successful. We ain't going to accept no excuse for nothing. If they hungry, guess what? We going to feed them at school. School became everything. We fed them. We clothed them. They did everything they needed to do at school. And what ended up happening was we ended up eliminating a lot of the excuses of, well, I don't have this. Well, I didn't ask you whether you had that. We already got that in play. But here's the unique thing with me. I was afforded the opportunity to teach in Lakota for 10 years. I was one of my first, when I got done, I was at Princeton I was an autistic, I was a Velcro to an autistic kid. That was one thing that changed my life, and I may share that with you. But the year after that, I ended up going up to Lakota, and I was there for 10 years. And, those are affluent communities. The median income is, $200,000, and those kids are living apparently what's a great life. But what I figured out was those kids were struggling. If their parent wasn't around and all they did was give them the money just to kind of coexist, that was even worse than a kid not even having a parent, because you gave them the money and just said, here, this will take my place of me. I've had plenty of kids just break down and just say, man, I just want somebody to listen to me. I just want to talk to somebody. So at the end of the day, that was the common theme amongst all kids. They just want to be cared for. They just want to be listened to. And if you're going somewhere good, they want to go too. And it's totally up to us to open up our houses, open up our cars, open up our life to them. And a lot of people used to ask me, say, Mitch, man, you got a family. You got 2 sets of twins and a wife. How does that work? Well, what I had to do was incorporate my wife, my family, with Taft basketball. And Taft basketball had to become part of my family, which ended up creating what? One huge family. And in families, you have some good times, you have some bad times, but at the end of the day, you always got each other. So that us versus the world mentality was just really codependent upon the fact that they knew I had their back, Mr. Smith had their back, Eric Martin had their back, the teachers at Taft had their back. It's just totally amazing what happens when you start to galvanize a group of people. And it was funny because at that time, the girls basketball, they were everything. And I never forget our first couple days of practice. I was telling our kids, I said, hey, you realize we could go to the state championship this year. And our women's coaches laughed at us. They said, do y'all realize that they ain't had a win this season? I said, no. I said, we got a unique opportunity to win the state championship this year. And what people didn't realize is those kids had bought in. And now it's totally up to me and the other administration to develop an environment for them to flourish in. So one of the first things we did was, and it's funny, the same couch that was in the office when I came with Eric in 95, Eric Thomas, was the same couch that was in that office when I got there in 2003. You know what the first thing I did? The first thing we did, I ain't gonna say I, because the coaches helped me too. We threw that couch in the garbage. We threw everything out, everything. And we literally started from scratch. And I never forget, those clinics that everybody goes to. And I went to a clinic and Coach Weber, who's out of Kansas State now, he made a statement that kind of resonated with me. He said, every year, do something new or have something new or fresh for your kids to see. And it was like, as soon as we threw that couch out, as soon as we threw all that other stuff out, they figured right then, man, well, this is something new. This is going to be something different. And we just started building from there. And it was really, really unique. And what happened was we just grew to love each other. And the love still exists to this day. And that's the funny thing, like when you get to talking about at the college level and you get to talking about a lot of people. I know an assistant that was there at Ohio State, we had agree to disagree moment because I really respect her and she's a heck of a coach. But, they was like, well, you don't necessarily have to love each other. And I disagree vehemently with that. If I am asking you to make certain sacrifices and I'm going to make these same sacrifices, that relationship is going to grow into a love relationship. Just like in a marriage, I got to sacrifice, my wife has to sacrifice, but we don't mind sacrificing because of what? We care deeply for each other. But it's the same way with your teams. You got to be in a situation, you got to paint a picture in an environment to where you care for them deeply. Everybody does the same thing, X's and O's.
But let's talk about that a little deeper though. And I agree with everything you just said. And I've seen it firsthand from kids I coached AAU with in inner city kids in terms of what does and doesn't work with them. And I've had my fair share of screw ups on my end. But yeah. I've seen the kids that you've had, they spend the night at your house, you become a father figure to them. And I want to say one thing, which is, we're having a conversation here where, looking back, it's portrayed as a lot of good times and, all the great things you did. But to build what you built, to tear down some of those roadblocks with mentality in that neighborhood of we can or cannot be successful, you did it with a no-nonsense approach. You did it with a very honest approach. And you did it with what literally is the definition of tough love. So, speak to your style and just how you had to maybe. I assume you're going to say you had to break them kids up to break them down to build them back up.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It's a couple things that my mom taught me. She taught me when she says your first day in the classroom. She says what you're never going to do. Never, ever, ever lie to a kid. She says, always tell them the truth. They may be disappointed, but always tell them the truth because at the end of the day, they going to know that you lying. And once they know that you lying, guess what? You'll never, ever, ever, ever get their trust back once they know you lying. So that's the first thing I did. I let those kids know that I'm not going to lie to you. I'm always going to be up front with you. But here's some things that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to commit to a way of life. And what I told them and what I showed them from my life and from a lot of different people that I've been around that I introduced them to, there's going to be a crossroad in your life. You got to make this decision. And you got to make the decision. And I'm going to forego a lot of the stuff that had weighed me down in the past. And I'm just going to concentrate on these things that this guy is telling me. I'm going to trust him. And once I establish the idea of trust and that I'm going to be here, then I could then start to grind them a little bit. And here's the deal. When you start to grind on kids and grind on them, there's a relationship that a lot of people, like you said, that they don't see. All they see is the end result. But they didn't see that kid crying on my shoulder or crying on our coach's shoulders, or they didn't see, the kid was just, I tell you this, and not to go off topic or not off course, two of my kids, when I first got to Taft, two of my kids were homeless. They were homeless. So you don't take a homeless kid, and when I say homeless, they was on the street, and you take them in, and you feed them, and you clothe them, and you guide them in the right way. Well, what happens is once that trust is established, and they kind of understand that you're here for the betterment of them, they give you their heart, they give you their soul, they give you everything they have. And then when they don't have any more to give, guess what? They show up the next day and they give it. So once we had got to that point, they felt that, well, as long as this guy is going to show us the right way and he's going to paint this picture of we're going to be successful and this is how we be successful, and he's not going to take any excuses, I'm going to follow him. Now, here's the funny thing. There's a couple things that I put in place. One of the next things I did after we threw out the couch, I told him, and you got to understand, this is July. School ain't even got here yet. I told him, I said, the teacher's always right, period. If they write me and tell me you didn't show up, you didn't show up. If they write me and email me and tell me you didn't turn this in, you didn't turn it in. So I'm going to eliminate that excuse of, well, the teacher did this. No, shut up. The teacher said you need to be where you need to be, how you need to be. And I'll tell you, this is one of the other things Mr. Smith kind of let me do. He would send security down to watch my class to make sure that they kind of got to class and they got dressed and they kind of, knew what to do. I would literally go sit in class before, as the bell had rung, I would go sit in class and be waiting on them. And waiting on them to walk in there, showing up late, not sitting in the front, combing their hair, all those other things. And when they figured out that I wasn't playing and I was going to be that guy, man. And then when they got caught up in a situation where they were that way and they weren't going to do what I asked to do, and then the ramifications of that, oh, my goodness. Bob Huggins probably says it best. I'm going to teach you two things. I'm going to teach you how to run, and I'm going to teach you how to sit. And unfortunately for them, I probably played for one of the toughest college coaches you could play for. And one thing he believed in is running. And I forgot more ways about running than I showed them. And we used to run. We would run up them stairs. And in Taft, they had this long hallway. And we would take them 45-pound plates, and we would run that hallway, and then we would run up three flights of stairs and then run back down the same length hallway, and they had to come back down. And that went for hours.
Hours. There's no doubt that your first team, or my first year doing this, I started with Cincinnati Prep Hoops Report, and I got to go my first year. You guys won the state championship. I was around you guys a lot. You were very accommodating, letting me watch a lot of practices. And I'll never forget watching Adolphus Washington dominate, who plays in the NFL now, he dominated high school basketball games. And I figured out the reason he dominated high school basketball games because I went to a Taft practice and he was practicing with the heaviest weight vest on that they make. And if he missed a rebound, there was no, well, I couldn't jump because I didn't have a weight vest on. It was go get the damn rebound. And I say that to say this, Mitch. When I think about my early days in doing this on the media side, I connect two people together. And I think you'll like this comparison is I connect you and I connect Dan Fleming, who was the head coach of LaSalle forever and, just retired. He's now, working, getting to watch his daughter play and his son play in college and everything. And when you guys won a state championship, LaSalle won a state championship the same year. And afterwards, after LaSalle won the state title, I talked to Ryan Fleming, Dan's son. He was so mature as an 18-year-old. And he said to me, the first thing he said to me is he said, this is why we ran in 100 degrees all summer outside. And I thought, I was like, for 18-year-old, I'm like, that's an unbelievable statement. And I was 22, 23. So, but Taft and LaSalle, there's nobody that worked harder on conditioning. There's nobody that put more time in and more effort on that. Now, my thing is this. When I've coached inner city kids, one of the roadblocks that I really run into in dealing with kids on the AAU circuit is I used to get a lot of kids from that culture who would lose a game and they didn't know how to accept losing if they tried hard. Because what they wanted to do, Mitch, is they wanted to tell you why I didn't try. So it's okay that he beat me. He's still shitty. I just didn't try. And that's one of the things that you've really torn down at Taft, and Flem was able to tear down at LaSalle. And I remember my high school coach was a guy named Rich Hoyt. I don't think you know him. And he was interviewing some coaches when he got into coaching, and he told me that one of the things he was talking to Flem about, LaSalle and Moeller and Taft and all the great programs, and he said that Flem told him that the most important thing in his program is that his kids genuinely thought that the coolest kid in the program, the kid that had the most cred off the court, was the kid who played the hardest on the court. And I think that's what you guys also is the extension of LaSalle, what you guys did at Taft.
Yeah. And to that point, we put up here's the thing too, and I, just touched on a little bit earlier. We accepted no excuses, none. But once we accepted no excuses, I had to not only hold you to it, I had to hold myself to it. I had to hold coaches to it. And then you get the right people around in your program. And then they start talking the same thing. And they start talking about, holding kids accountable, holding them accountable. And what the interesting thing with that is we were all kind of common in our approach was that our kids, they knew that we loved them. They actually knew that we cared. Now, we were tough. I've seen Slim be as tough on his kids. But at the end of the day, they knew he loved. And I always speak it to this point. You ever seen that kid who they know that they're not good, but they still show up every single day? But you still give that kid every single opportunity, and you still give that kid every ounce of who you are. When the other kids see that, they buy in. And that's Slim has done that. Neil has done that. George Jackson, I posted something. I don't know if you've seen this on Twitter. George Jackson at Withrow, he was kind of the icon that, and Paul Andrews, they were some of the icons that I kind of locked into and watched from, afar. And even though Coach Drews was my coach in high school, had a chance to watching from afar and watch how they just kind of went about their business. And then John Thompson, Nolan Richardson, and Robert Hughes, who was the head coach at Fort Worth Dunbar. I used to watch them and how they interact. And I said, man, if I could get to the point where I could care for kids like that, they'll do whatever you ask them to do. And then it's totally, totally unbelievable. And this is the one common theme from whatever program, that our kids, when they left us, they went to some really, really good programs. So, for instance, like I know a lot of people may have different problems with the Prophets and this, that, and the other, and Ozzie and Trey and all them, but they were good for my kids. All Ohio, Jerry Watson, they were good for my kids. Mike Price, they were good. They were good for my kids. And the reason I would like to think that is because when I sent them to Ozzie, I sent them to Mike Price, we sent them there with a no-nonsense approach. So Ozzie could do whatever he needed to do. Mike Price could do whatever he needed. Jerry Watson and them could do whatever they needed to do. And we were just kind of anchors for each one of those kids to be able to continue to do something good. So whether I was preaching X, Y, and Z, Mike Price would be preaching it over here. And then the next AAU for all Ohio, they would preach it from over here. And it's hard for them because guess what? They don't have that significant amount of time with them that I do or that we do. So when you get to asking your kids to do some of the things that we ask them, you have to almost what I call declutter their life. And that's kind of what we did down at, to Marco, BT, Bobby Jones, and Anthony Johnson. We all did that. We decluttered their life and we eliminated their excuses, and we were not accepting excuses. And then I got real lucky. I ain't gonna lie to you. If it wasn't for Orlando Berry with that All Ohio Purple group, I mean, yeah, we were doing some good things, but he had already decluttered their life, and he had already got them to the point where they were locked in. They had to then change because you remember, he would play fast, but not fast like us, and he would play primarily zone. Well, we went man, and we had to play man, and them kids adjusted. They didn't give you any flack about it, but that's because they had really good anchors in their life, and people had really just embraced them to help them. And all I had to do in their case was not mess it up. And, you know, if I knew what I knew now, I would probably have been better served to serve Eddie and Bird and all them. And you know, and like I said, at the end of the day, it was really good that we did a good job in terms of decluttering their life and just kind of getting them to focus on life itself. I mean, we talked more about life issues than we did basketball. And then it was up to me to kind of relate the difference and how to make those things relatable.
Well, I think you brought up one, and you know, this isn't a podcast to talk X's and O's, but I think the way you guys played basketball speaks to life, and it's kind of what you were getting at. And you know, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen Taft, you're not going to see a team that plays faster, and you're not going to see a team that defends with more effort and more pressure on the ball than Taft. And that's kind of what you really raised your kids to be like with Taft, is the intimidator. And then that's how you won the state championship. You had a kid like an Orlando Berry Jr. who he's a good player. He wasn't a great player in terms of talent. I mean, he's about 5'6", right, but he has so much heart and he was such an intimidator that you guys were able to build that up. And then you took that and moved that past the court and helping these kids, you know, who some of Orlando Berry comes from, you know, a two-parent home, and, you know, his parents are both involved. He had a little more resources than some of your kids, but you took a lot of those kids who came from nothing on that team, and they understand now what it was like to be a part of a winning program. And then, you know, those kids have gone on to do more than they probably would have had they not played basketball at Taft. And, you know, I haven't coached AAU. I coach with the Profits. I've coached in other programs where we've had so many Cincinnati kids, and I can tell you this, and if I coach a kid in an AAU practice, the first practice of the year, and then give me one more, give me the second practice of the year, the way that kid practices, I can tell a lot about his high school coach. If there's a kid that comes in and thinks that practice is playing, it's one thing, versus a kid that comes from a winning high school program that knows that once practice starts, it's time to work.
That's true. That's true. And it's funny you say that, because that was one of our calling cards, because my wife would always take note of that. She says, everybody talks about how your kids play, and you can tell a Taft kid, you can tell the way that they play it, how hard they play, you can tell. And you could take a generation, because like I said, I was there 10 years. So you could take a group of kids that was there my first year and the same group that was there my last year, and they would all seamlessly play together, and the expectations of playing would be the same. It's funny that you bring that up. I was talking to my West High kids. I was talking to them last week, and I told them, I said, all of my kids, they still play hard. They're not even playing professionally anymore. They're not even, even pickup. They still play hard. And all of them had just took a picture of them lifting. I guess they all do that. What's that thing they got in New York where they all go on the monkey bars and they do different weightlifting exercises? And my kids, the Taft kids, that's what they were doing. I said, it's a Sunday afternoon. It's hot as heck outside. And it's a group of 10 of them that all play for me. That's what they were doing. And all they talk about is just playing hard, whatever I'm going to do, if I'm going to work. And that's one thing we always talked about. The work that I put in, I'm going to be rewarded for it. Now, does that mean I'm going to be rewarded for it right now? No. And that's the one thing about coaching in the inner city that you have to really teach is patience with the kids. You got to tell them that it doesn't mean we're going to win right now. If you do this right, it doesn't mean that. But what happens is over a period of time, by us doing it the right way, by us being accountable and me holding you accountable, 6 months from now, doing it the right way with the same speed and athleticism is going to be leaps and bounds from where you are now. And I said, that's where you got to get to. Because you think about it, in June, we played in June, West High. That's the most I think I've ever lost in my life, ever. But the thing that
let me interrupt you on that, Mitch. and I'm sure you've told your kids this, there are got to be a lot of high school coaches in Cincinnati saying, this isn't Taft these first couple years. Mitch is at West High.
Yeah.
Maybe there's not a lot of talent. It's my chance to finally beat that asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been waiting for years. So I know you told your kids that, right?
Yeah, I told them. And you know what I told them? I said now, and I said, what you guys will learn about me is I'm not arrogant. I'm not. I don't beat my chest. I said, but let me kind of key you in on this. Not that they were really wanting to beat me. Yeah, they were, and I ain't gonna say not. But what they figured was his team is gonna play as hard as you've ever seen a group of individuals play. If we don't play hard, we're going to get embarrassed. I don't care how many games I don't care who we just beat. I don't care how many. We're going to be in trouble if we don't play hard. And it was funny because Jimmy Leon, our first time we scrimmaged Mount Healthy, and we were down like 6 with like 50 seconds left, and we ended up winning by 2. And we had Jimmy Leon out at Lakota West. We had them next. He said, I just told my kids, if you don't play hard, they are going to beat you, and they're going to beat you in the worst way. And I mean, his kids came out and played hard. My kids, they just don't know how long you have to play and how hard you have to play for that length. They don't understand that yet. But, you know, everybody was going to come at us. And I told them, I said, you're going to get everybody's best shot. I said, and I can't run. We can't run from that, and I can't help you. I said, so what you're going to have to do is you have to lace them up, and you're going to have to be tough. And that's the other thing, too. I think a lot of people get this misconception when you talk about some inner city kids. I think some people get the misconceptions that they're mean, they're unrelenting. No, those kids are as, and when I say soft, I'm not saying soft in terms of, fighting or, making it me versus them. They have some of them, and here's the better word, they have some of the warmest spirits that I think I've ever been around. And what happens is when you get a kid like that with a warm spirit and you cultivate it over some years, you know what happens? That kid loves deeply. I got 3 kids right now that I've coached that are married. And we used to talk about this all the time. And I share this with you in a second. We used to talk about this all the time. I said, don't you guys ever get tired of going to funerals? I said, have you ever tasted wedding cake? And see, I would always paint pictures. And it was a couple of my kids that never tasted wedding cake. So what I did was I went to Buskins down the street, right down there by City Hall. It's not there anymore. I went and I just ordered a wedding cake. And they came into practice one day. And before we practiced, I said, here, taste a piece of wedding cake. And they actually tasted the wedding cake, and they was like, wow, man, this is pretty good. I said, so they don't serve wedding cake at funerals. I said, so I just want to go to a wedding. I want somebody, when their kid is born, tell me, I want that for you. And Eddie Gray got married here just recently. And him and his wife, they've been together since college or high school. They care for each other. Kent Estelle's getting ready to get married. Jamal Akbar, kid that I had out at Wynn Woods, he's got those kids. We just talked about the good things about life. Being married, having a family. And I never forget Marquez Johnson, one of the toughest nuts I've ever had to crack. I don't mean him nut as crazy. He just one of the toughest walnuts I've ever had to crack. I put him off the team and put him out of the program. If I did it 5 times, I probably put him out 20 times. And little did I know, he was listening to everything we talked about. Because we would have these fish bowls after practice, and we would come up with different stories, different things, current events, things that happened, and we would just talk about those things. And little did I know, I put him off, but he would always pay attention. So his senior year, I said, well, Marquez, I said, now I know you're going to go off and I know you're going to be upset, but I'm not going to start you. He said, Coach, I know. He said, I'm okay. He said, it would only make sense that Dede and all them would start. They've all been together. They've all played together. So let them start, and we would get off to a really good start because they know each other. I said, wow. End up being the MVP of the state championship game off the bench. Well, we helped him get into college because he was going to have to go junior college. Helped him get into college. He did a good job there. Went to Pikeville. Had some struggles down there, and basketball ended up being taken from him. But the one thing he told me, he said, Coach Mitch, he said, I remember you used to always talk about this guy from Walmart. He said, I'm not going to be the guy at Walmart, but I'm going to go to work every day just like that guy at Walmart. And I'm going to do my very best to help as many people as I can. And lo and behold, the kid works at Coke right now. He's doing a really good job. He's taking care of his kid. Now, is he in the NBA Summer League? No. Is he playing in the Devereaux? No. But he's raising his family the right way. He's there for his family. He's there for his kid. And that's what we tried to do at Taft. And every place I've been, we've just tried to let people know, let the kid know, this is how you go about your life. You can live a really, really happy life. And it's not necessarily monetary. It doesn't have to be monetary. And I always believed in service, too. That's one of the things that we always did, incorporated in our program. Because I'm going to tell you, like I told our kids at West High, I said, your hands look like cups. Every time you turn around, you got your hand out wanting something. I said, when is the last time any one of you have done anything for anybody? I only had 2 kids raise their hand. And the other 12 couldn't tell me when they had done something for anybody. And I said, that's a poor man's life. How do you exist and you do nothing for anybody? How do you do that?
And that's Mitch. That's one of the things I touched on. I did a July preview podcast, and one of the things we talked about with just players having the mentality to go into the month of July for the evaluation period with college coaches. And I said, for any kid out there who comes from an underprivileged situation, like many of your kids do, they got to understand there's a similar kid. There's not a similar kid. There's 100 similar kids for every one of them that's not blessed with talent to play basketball. And when I look at I know Marquez Johnson very well, and he's a kid. He's still around basketball, getting run in, having a good life. And like you said, he's one of the kids, and one of the things this podcast is all about is he used basketball as a tool to better his situation. And I tell you this, if that kid can go to college to play basketball, then nobody else can complain about their life because he's had to deal with more than just about anybody else.
That's true.
And if you put the work in, you can do it. And in wrapping up here, Mitch, I think we're out of time here. But in wrapping up here, I want to say that you're one of the most polarizing figures in Cincinnati basketball, probably the state of Ohio basketball. And let's just be frank about it. People see Taft. People see the way you play basketball, the emotion that your kids play with, and it's very, very easy for them to mislabel you. And they use the word thugs. I mean, they think that you got a bunch of thugs. And I think anybody that hates on Mark Mitchell in Cincinnati, I think I can refer him to this podcast right now and can say, it's about more than basketball, and that's what you build at Taft.
No doubt.
I'm sure you're going to do that at West High, and that's why you're one of the coaches I look up to, and I'm really thankful you came on the podcast. So
thanks a lot.
I really, really appreciate your time.
Yep. Thanks.
Again, guys, that was Mark Mitchell, former state champion and a Cincinnati high school coaching legend. You listen to the Triple Double podcast. For Jason Morrow, I'm Corey Albertson. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.